I got a new mug. It says, "The world is falling apart around us, and I'm dying inside." And that is precisely how I feel about the world today, currently. My partner is downstairs making a lot of noise. So if you hear anything, that's what that is. Also, my across the street neighbor is blasting music because that's just what he does every day for whatever reason, all day. But anyway, welcome back to my channel. My name is Steph, and if you're new here, I'm Steph. I can't believe it's already time for the mid-year book tag, but here we go. It's that time of year. I had to reflect on my reading, and wow, has it been a really weird reading year for me. I have actually DNF'd a lot this year, which is something new for me, and I've read a lot of books that I probably wouldn't have picked up for a while, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later in this video. But I also feel like I have a pretty decent stack of books that I've loved this year or that have surprised me. As always, I know that this tag is meant for you to have one answer, but that couldn't be me. But if you don't know, the mid-year book tag is a tag where you answer questions about your best, your worst, your most surprising, your most disappointing books of the year. I actually don't know where this tag originated from, but I will leave the questions down below, and if I can find where this tag originated from, I will link it down below. So question number one is the best book that you've read so far in 2022, and obviously I have a stack of books instead of just one. So these are some of my favorite books this year. They're some of the best books that I've read this year. And this isn't even the complete stack. These are just the ones that maybe are in a series that started off my journey in a series that like I absolutely love now. But there is one in the stack that like sticks out to me as probably my most favorite of the year. And I don't think this will come as any surprise, but it is The Assassin's Apprentice. While this isn't my favorite book in the series, this is the book that started it all. So I ended up marathoning the entire Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy in the Elderlings world. So I think this has to be my number one favorite book of the year because it has opened an entire fantasy world to me that I've been intimidated to jump into for years. As you know, I read a whole variety of things, but I love fantasy. It's what I grew up reading. It's what got me into reading. I just haven't been this sucked into a world and made it my whole new personality in a long time. Like even when I read the David Bode trilogy, which is another series that I absolutely loved this year. It is one of my favorite series that I've started and completed this year. Even when I read that one, like I love the characters, I love that world, but something about this world, like I continuously think about it. I am desperate to get to the next trilogy, not the Live Ship Trader trilogy. I'm actually currently reading that one, but I believe it's called the Tawny Man trilogy because you are back with Fitz. Fitz is the main character in here and you just fall in love with him. And like this series, this world, I think Robin Hobb is not for everybody. It depends on what kind of fantasy reader you are. If you like that classic slow burn fantasy, then you'll probably really love this. If you're a character driven reader, you'll probably really love this because this very much focuses on the characters. I would even argue that the first book is fantasy light because you don't really get inundated with the world or the magic system in this first book. There are like inklings to it, you're hearing about it, you're kind of being introduced to it, but you learn a lot of this world and the magic system through Fitz, and you're following him from like the age of 6 until in this trilogy at least 19. And so you get to follow him through the course of his life and you're learning with him. And I really love that style of learning about a magic system with a character, but it doesn't always work. But in here, it's done really, really well. And I don't know, I just fell in love with this world and the characters, but primarily the characters. And that's why I think that this one will probably be my number one favorite book of the year, or at the very least, something within this world will be, because I do really hope to get pretty far into the world this year. Question number 2 is best sequel that you've read in 2022. I've actually only read 2 sequels, and so that is Kingdom of Copper and Royal Assassin. This is probably not surprising either. And as a matter of fact, these are the second books in both the trilogies that I marathoned this year, and they're both my favorite books in the series. So that's also why they're the best sequels, because they're actually genuinely my favorite books within the series as a whole, which is pretty cool. So Royal Assassin is the second book in the Farseer trilogy. This is by far the best book in the trilogy. You just get so wrapped up in the characters and the drama and the politics, and you're starting to learn so much more about this world, and it's very, very interesting. I loved this book. This is definitely the book that solidified that this would be a favorite series of all time and that I would want to move forward in this world. And then The Kingdom of Copper is the second book in the Daevabad trilogy, the first being City of Brass, and this one, much like Royal Assassin, is that book where you're diving deeper into the politics, the world building, but especially character dynamics. And in the Daevabad trilogy, if you have read it before, you'll know that like character dynamics really, really shift in Kingdom of Copper, and this sets off a lot of shit that goes down in the third book. And as I've said many times, I'm a character-driven reader. So for some reason, second books tend to work for me because there's like a lot of character building and character arcs and like diving deep into your character dynamics that I just eat up. And so second books seem to work for me. Question number 3 is new releases that you want to read but you haven't gotten to yet. Honestly, I haven't gotten to so many books this year, but also I'm trying not to pay attention to new releases as heavily as I have in the past, mainly because one of my major goals this year was to read down my TBR, but mainly the ones that I own, because I don't want to say too many, but I own a lot of books and it gets overwhelming. And I think this is actually a big reason why I go into reading slumps. It's something I'm learning recently. I get myself overwhelmed with the amount of books that I have access to, just even on a daily basis, and I sit and stare at them and I pull them off the shelf and I'm like, oh my God, I really need to read this. I've had this forever. And then I start it and then I see another one and I'm like, oh, I need to start this one. And so then I start that one and suddenly I have 20 books that I'm in the middle of and I've lost interest in reading at all because I'm really overwhelmed. So does that answer the question? But also to answer this question, like legitimately, there are a couple new releases that I've bought recently, and I'm sure like other people, even though they just go on my shelf and sit there forever, I do get really excited when I buy these new books and like I actually want to read them immediately. So I'm gonna show you a little book haul, a couple books that I recently got. They're these ones. These ones I've bought recently and I've been really excited to read all of them. Question number 4 is most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. Like I said, I actually haven't been keeping up with new releases. The way that I've been getting new releases are if friends are like, you need to pick this up. Or if I go into the bookstore and I'm like, I've never seen this before, and I read the synopsis and I'm like, oh, this looks cool. And then I go look it up on Goodreads and see that like all of my friends are interested in reading this, and then I look at like the ratings and some reviews and then I pick it up, probably, most likely, because I like buying books. Question number 5 is biggest disappointments of the year. And honestly, I've DNF'd a lot this year. I talked about it kind of in the beginning of this video. I've been DNFing way more liberally this year than I ever have before, which is good because I think it helps me a lot from getting into reading slumps, which is something that is very common for me as a reader for reasons that I mentioned before. But also because I have a hard time DNFing because I'm like, oh, what if it gets better? Or what if I'm just not in the mood for it? And it's like, Stephanie, you're never gonna be in the mood for it. So just get it out of here. So I'm gonna talk about the 2 DNFs that were really disappointing for me because as I've spent some time away from them, I don't think I'm gonna go back to them, even though my intentions definitely were to go back to them, especially because both of them are 5-star predictions for me. First one is The Priory of the Orange Tree, and this is one that I probably will not go back to just because I have forgotten everything about it. I didn't have any good feelings towards it when I was in the middle of reading it. Like, it was definitely a struggle to get through, and I was very surprised because this definitely was a 5-star prediction for me, which is stupid because I don't have a good track record with this author. I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends actually really love this book, and I think there is a lot to be said about this book. There's a lot of things in here that I think will work really, really well for people that just don't work for me based on the fact that I'm a character-driven reader. and I was not attached to the characters at all, so it made me care very little about the plot. Sorry, my battery died, so the angle might be slightly different. I'm really sorry about that. But anyway, the second DNF that was really disappointing for me was Light from Uncommon Stars, and I really tried to convince myself that I was going to come back to this book when I like adjusted my expectations, because I think I went in with all of the wrong expectations. A big part of that though was the marketing of this book. So the tagline for this book is that it's like the long way to a smaller planet, which to me, in my brain, I was like, oh cool, it's gonna be set in space and there's gonna be like discussions about different species and gender and sexuality. This isn't even in space, so that number one was like a weird moment for me. And I felt really disconnected with the writing style. Writing styles don't always bother me, I think, as much as other people. Like, I don't focus too heavily on the writing style, but like obviously there are some writing styles that if you just don't connect to them, you don't connect to them, and this was one of those. I felt like the writing was really disjointed, and the tone versus the writing and how this was marketed just like missed all the marks for me. So I don't think I'm gonna go back to this, especially because after the fact of DNFing it, I have looked up reviews and a lot of people have said the same things as me and have just given it like an average 3 stars. Question number 6 is biggest surprise, and I have to say Delilah Green Doesn't Care, because if you know anything about me, I am not a romance reader. I don't gravitate towards romance very easily. I have to be really convinced to read a romance book, and like, believe me, I desperately want to be a romance girl. I want to love romance the way that other people love romance, but it just doesn't call to me in that way. I don't know. But when I heard about Delilah Green Doesn't Care, I knew it was a sapphic romance, and I was like, I need more sapphic romance in my life because it's just my favorite thing in books. And I ate this shit up. It was so good, but there's like even more complex aspects to the storyline as well that like make it a really well-rounded book, but it's also funny. Like, not a lot of books make me laugh out loud, but this actually was making me laugh out loud. And Delilah Green is a badass. Like, if you read traditionally straight romances and you like a bad boy, you're gonna get this out of here, because I feel like Delilah has that energy. She has that BDE, you know what I'm saying? And I love her for it. Am I in love with her? Probably. Question number 7 is favorite new author, whether that's new to me author or a debut author. Both of these are new to me authors, kind of, and that's just Robin Hobb and Ashley Herring Blake. I don't know, they've stuck out to me a lot. Like, I couldn't stop thinking about Delilah Green Doesn't Care, and obviously I can't shut up about the Farseer trilogy and Robin Hobb in general. Ashley Herring Blake has actually written a lot of YA books, so I am gonna try those books. And basically, I'm going to pick up as much as I possibly can from both of these authors. Question number 8 is new fictional crush. Delilah. Question number 9 is new favorite character or characters. Obviously, I have to say more than one here. I love Fitz and the Fool from the Farseer trilogy, and then the whole Daevabad crew. Like, there's not really a bad character in the bunch. You know what I'm saying? So those are like all of my favorite characters of the moment. I mean, I guess I could say Delilah Green and Claire, her love interest. And also, like, while we're at it, all of the little beans here in The Weight of the Stars. Like, this is a found family that I would 100% be a part of. Loved every single one of them. And then everyone in Legend and Lattes. Like, all of the core crew here, I am just so excited to read more. Question number 10 is books that made you cry. I've actually cried a lot at books this year, but one of the books that made me like sob was The Weight of the Stars. This is just like happy and sad tears simultaneously. A lot of the characters in here are just going through a lot. As well as the book We Are Okay. I think that one made me cry equally as much as The Weight of the Stars. That one specifically hit me in like a different way because it was talking a lot about losing somebody that you love. So the main character, her grandfather dies, and there are just things that she's trying to work through. It just hit me really hard. It was something that was very close to me. In a lot of ways, it reflected a lot of how I felt and things that I went through when I was younger. And so, you know, I had a little breakdown, but it was good. You know, crying is good for you. I've learned that. I come from a family where crying is not okay. But as I've gotten older, I definitely allow myself to cry a lot more. So it was nice to just sob one out. Question number 11 is books that made you happy, and hands down, Legends and Lattes. This is a slice of life fantasy. It's just low stakes, high serotonin. You know what I mean? I loved this. Like I said, I'm really excited for the fact that there will probably be more in this world. So far, we only know of one book that's being published after this one since Tor picked it up, but I think there's gonna be more. And it's just really exciting to see so many people picking this book up and loving it. It's just like what you need. It's like a little hug. And so this book definitely made me the happiest this year so far. Question number 12 is your favorite book to film adaptation that you watched this year. I think the only one that I've watched is Heartstopper, and I loved it. It was great. It was a good time. It made me giddy. Question number 13 is favorite video you've done so far this year. And I have really been leaning into vlogs. Like, that's kind of what my channel has always been, is vlogging, because it's the thing that I love to do the most. It's what I love watching the most. So I create the content that I like to watch. But I will say my Read It Down series, which if you don't know, Read It Down is this kind of game that I came up with where I have various friends and different booktubers. Each month, one of them comes on, picks 2 books from my physical TBR. I send them pictures of my TBR and they film me a little clip, and I get to react to it. In that moment, the introduction is me genuinely reacting to what they've chosen for me. And then I read those books in that month. And so, I mean, I say that if I don't do it, then I have a book buying ban. Sometimes that's true, other times it's not. But that being said, it's been my favorite so far because it's been really fun to see what people pick. First off, because there are some people who've selected books that have been on my shelf for a really long time. Sometimes I'm definitely not in the mood for some of the books that have been picked for me, but then I'll read them and they're great, or they're not. And it's nice because I've been learning a lot about my own taste, but also they're just like so fun in general. Like, I love not knowing what people are gonna pick and how I'm gonna feel about them. I actually am excited for the next video in the series because I am going to finally, since it's 6 months, I'm going to finally be talking about how much I have actually read off of my physical TBR because of this series. I've probably read more of my physical TBR this year than I have in the last 2 years because I used to just get so many books from the library, which is a great source of getting books, but it's not great when you ignore your actual books that you already own to read all of the library books. You know what I'm saying? Question number 14 is the most beautiful book that you've bought this year. Hands down, this is just like my favorite book. There are some really, really beautiful books. Like, for example, I love this book too. It really speaks to me, but this one is just, it's stunning. Of course, the starting yard work, but we're gonna push through it because I'm on the last question. So question number 15 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Well, my friend, you know, these are like newer books that I've acquired that I'm like really interested in reading recently. Also these. I have a lot of books that I need to read. So that was the last question of the mid-year book tag, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below some of your answers to these questions, and also just to remind you, the questions and if I can find the original creator of this, their link will all be down below, so check that out, especially if you want to do this video. And let me know if you did do this video. I would love to watch it. Oh yeah, and if you don't have anything to say, leave a moon emoji for Daughter of the Moon Goddess because it's beautiful. So leave a moon emoji, whichever one that you want. One with a face, one without a face. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!